the fourth talk for this year. And by way of introduction, which is a little different than what I have been doing in the past, I've got a few questions or some things that I wanted to point out. On July 1, 1998, the school changed its name from Kansas Newman College to Newman University. Why change the name? And I think it's more important, why not? Now you might say, well, we've been changing it every so many years. It seems like it's about time to do another one of these. And we actually, it is true, we went through the longest period that we had one name in the last talk. We were 25 years. And it's actually been 20 years since we were at this name. Now, I am not so convinced that we're going to be changing it in the near future, okay? I think that we're set. But the question, I think, is more, why would we have done it then? Well, it's because of the fact that we did have the things necessary according to what normally is said, at least west of the Mississippi, when you can have a university, when you have more than one school. And we had a graduate school and we had an undergraduate school. One of the other things they look for is library holdings. So there's other things that are looked for. Now, excuse me, for those of you who were here last time, you know we started those graduate programs already within, it was like 94, 95 was the very first one. And we know it was in education. Well, why didn't we do it then? Well, it's because you want to have a little bit more in relation that you've already shown that you have some programs. And so I will be talking about that to show you why we were at that point. This talk covers not just a name change, but rather the past 20 years. And I decided last time there was no way I could use the same structure I've been using for the other talks, because this period really isn't history. It is recent. It is current events. And events are unfolding every single minute. So you keep this organic. So it's a different kind of presentation. I decided, I guess I forgot to do this. That was the last one. I want to talk about some of the big areas of the university. Now, this is my choice, okay? So I chose. You might have put different ones than the ones I did. But I chose to do it this way and present what I consider to be the most influential events that occurred in each area. Remember, this is my opinion, all right? There is no magic number. If I do an area, I might do 4. I might do 10. That doesn't mean that it's a more important area or not an important area. It's just the way it happened, okay? I actually start out with a smaller number and then they get bigger, and then I wear out at the end. I'll be honest with you. I was ready for this to be over. And I will conclude with the most influential events across the board for this 20 years. But I'm going to throw in something else that I decided as of yesterday that I'd like to add. But I'm always going to say, according to one interpreter. There are people in this room who were here for every one. I'm not saying they were here for every day. They might have had a day off. But the point is that they were here for all these 20 years as an employee. Now, I can't even say that because I didn't get back here until July 1 of 2001. So I was gone for 5 years. I was affiliated with the university, but I wasn't even physically present. So I wonder if I can even speak of not being here. But it's sometimes better if you're not somebody who's been here all the time. We have individuals in here who have been here a very short time. I was looking at the list and I said, it's very interesting. About 1/4 of those present can say they were here for almost the whole time. And about 1/4 can say they know a little bit from what they've been through. Then there's the ones that are the half that are all over the place in regard to it. Some have a lot of longevity, etc. So you could meet the interpreters also. And so we're going to begin. My first section is called Enrollment Management and Admissions. And I thought it was interesting because there's not too many people from this area that are here today. But there are some. Yes, yeah. This time, my comments will not always agree totally with what you see up there. Okay, in other words, I shortened them in relation to it. So, what do I want to say about total number of students? Well, if you recall, for those of you who were here last time, wow, in those 25 years, all of a sudden we got to the 90s and our enrollment went up, 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 up. And remember I told you that in the fall of '87 and in '88, we saw this terrific decline. People thought we were closing. That was the word out. And there were individuals who had been employees here who were spreading the word, which didn't help. So then, from then on, though, we started to go up, smaller, but then we hit that period, I mean, it went straight up. Did it continue to increase like that over the 20 years? I'm sure you know what my answer is. Yes and no. You're going to have a little of both. In this sense, there would be some years, and by the way, you don't ever compare. You do a fall enrollment, you compare it with a fall enrollment. Spring enrollment is usually down a little bit from what you have in the fall, so you compare it to the spring enrollment of previous years. That's how you have to do the comparisons. So that's what I'm talking about. There were some years that the fall enrollment went down. Not terrifically, but it did go down. And I can remember how we celebrated when we were definitely above solidly 2,000. And then it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going, and then we were celebrating 3,000. And then we were celebrating 3,500. Now I'm talking about head count, not full-time equivalency. I think another thing that's true, and it's influential, there was a pattern of hiring consultants that we needed help periodically. How do we do this? How do we do it better in recruiting? And so we would hire consultants. Sometimes they were companies. We've done more than one, and we've taken a look at it. Another one, though, is also for retention. And we got ideas from somebody who was telling us, these are ways you need to do this. Now, we continue in both areas. And it does, in fact. It does. There is no question. So that's another way in which we've done this. And by the way, I really would like to stress that, of saying that's very key. The size of the enrollment, management staff, and admissions counselors. What do I want to say about that? Well, it's grown, but not every year. I would say there were some years that we had less. One thing I can say, though, is that the diversification of staff responsibilities is honed regularly. I want to be pretty positive on this. So in other words, we have looked at it and changed responsibilities, and then we get some change coming in. Now I'm going to make a statement about an area that's not this one later on. And when I was going back over this, I said, ooh, maybe I should have said this is the one that I'm going to make the statement about later. But I've rethought it, and I think, nope, This is natural. This is something that normally happens. This is an area that's our first line, meeting the families, meeting the potential students, and also giving us ideas of how do we retain that, although that comes out of another area. The importance, and some of you, have you ever heard of Zenith Academy? Some people actually have heard it, okay. Zenith Academy is the forerunner for what we call as advanced standing. That was what its name was in the 90s. And so when we actually had that, I wanted to point out that we can now really say this program has really raised our total head count. Very definitely. And the amount of tuition raised has significantly increased. What were we celebrating recently again? Anybody can tell me about that one? That we had brought in how much with that program? We had surpassed 1 million. And that's been 2 years in a row, or is it? So, it is significant, okay? Another comment I think I want to make is, one of the things, though, that we're learning to do better, and that's been happening in the last few years, and that is what we call the low-hanging fruit. Because of the fact that these individuals have taken courses, enrolled in Newman, even if they were at their school, however they did it, the point is they already have an affiliation. What percentage of them come here to school? And we have started to increase that number. It's not fast, but we are definitely targeting, and that's an important thing to note. I want to say a little bit about international students. Over the years, the number of international students has varied. Some years, the countries from which they came has varied. There have been some times that we had concentrations from a certain area. That's not so true today. There are certain countries, but they're not just all from one continent. But we have certain ones of where they come. They're a little bit more spread out. One of the changes a lot of us don't realize is laws governing recruitment have changed significantly. And we sometimes don't know all of that. And that's why you have people in that area to be managing that who do keep up on those and can help us in relation to it. And sometimes we can get consultants that can help us further in that area too, and we have. Our support staff for these students appears to have decreased. Have the number of students decreased, and therefore we are? That's hard to answer. But at least I wanted to point that out. And so now, we're going to go to what I called the President's Office and Advancement. And here's why. Because these are the things that I really want to address. Fundraising, alumni, and university relations. There have been significant changes that have happened during the 20 years. Many of these have been dependent upon fundraising and capital campaigns. Now, some of these, I can tell you I was directly involved with, and there's a number of you in here that can say the same thing. But this has changed tremendously in our campus. First, the completion of the Beyond the Renaissance campaign. This was during the time of Sister Tarcisia Rhodes as president, and when that campaign finished in 2000, and she had already indicated that she would be finishing her term of office, what did we have as a result? We had Dave Matias Fine Arts Center, we had the gorgeous atrium, we had the O'Shaughnessy Sports Complex, That was the focus of the capital piece of that, okay? In addition, we had a new dining center. Additions, but not part of. In other words, we weren't raising money to do these, okay? We had a new dining center. It was the former maintenance building. And it's a very interesting story how a decision was made to go about that. Had to do with wanting to hold a dance in there, actually. We actually had a new maintenance building in which the maintenance people told us what they wanted in their building. And they certainly didn't want the Taj Mahal like they had had. A new residence hall. All of these were completed in 2000. So in other words, think about what I said of the building that we created that were done in 2000. Now here's some more. All of this finished in 2000. The residence hall we called New Hall. In fall of 2005, just in case you're interested, it was renamed Beata Hall. Okay? So that name came back. Also, we have another place on campus where we have something that bears that name, Beata, named for Beata Nettemeyer, the woman who was the head of the Adores here in Wichita when this place opened in '33. It is located right out there. People say it's the flagpoles, but it's also called Beata Plaza, in case you're interested. And out there is where the Sacred Heart statue is. So you will find the flags out there, etc. But that, if you go up and read the thing, you'll see that it's called Beata Plaza. So we have two places where that is. That's a striking one. Oh. Ryan Library top floor condemned. This is during Dr. Dunleavy's time. While not all of the changes that I'm going to be talking about here happened during, well, how do I have this right? See what I've got here. Okay. While not all of the changes happened during Dr. Dunleavy's tenure, the building, all of them had their genesis, their beginning during this time, okay? Here's what happened. Top floor of Ryan Library, there were cracks. It was ruled that it is not safe, therefore we can't let people go up there anymore. We used to have it where certain people could go up, and then they changed that. Finally they said, no way, we just can't do it anymore. So the Board of Trustees, known as the Board of Directors at that time, made the decision, we have got to close it. And so, what happened? The building closed, and the temporary site for the library returned to where it actually had been many years before, Sacred Heart Hall, 3rd floor. Not all the books were moved. You need to know that. Some things got sent to the Wichita Center for storage, including what was the beginnings of Newman's archives, in boxes. What I'll never forget is being told, bring it back. And I had to find out where it even was. All I know is that the athletics department was constantly asking me for certain things, and I'd have to go and dig them out over there at the Wichita Center through all the dust, etc., because things didn't get dusted when they got sent over there either. It's interesting. We also had electronic catalog search and a daily retrieval service for these books that were provided. There are a group of students who went here all 4 years, and during that time, they did not have a freestanding library. Now, Ryan Library was finished during Sister Sylvia's time, so that puts it at the very end of her term. So in 1970 to 71, that's when it was opened up. There it was. She was still around. That was our first freestanding library. That was important to get any kind of accreditation on a national and regional level. Very important to us. So now, here we are, and it's got to be closed. This is something you've got to take care of. So, what did we do? Well, we're going to have a capital campaign. It was launched to build a state-of-the-art library. I remember the terminology. With a student center and a campus conference center included in the blueprints. And then for a while, the conference center was chopped off. And then an additional gift was given and it was added back on. Thank God it was, because you wouldn't be sitting in here today, okay, if it had not been. So that's part of where we were with that. So the next thing, I should have talked about that. Successful completion of that campaign. Now, there's people who question some ways in which it was finished, but I think it was a successful completion of the capital campaign. And construction of the Dugan Library, the Fugate Student Center, and the Dugan Gorges Conference Center. Those were done, finished in 2007. Now, for those of you who were here, you're saying, yeah, but it took another year before we did like the outside part, the lawns and the plazas, and did all of those kinds of things, kind of the Founders Plaza out there, and another one here. We've got a whole bunch of these that are named for special donors that helped us out to do this. So those were very important, and that was completed for our 75th anniversary, and we celebrated that in 2008. Two new residence halls. Again, never part of a capital campaign, but we recognized that we needed space for students. So they were added also, 2007. Fugate and New Hall. We just got rid of a New Hall, so it was a free name again, okay? And so we had New Hall. And of course, today it is called Carochi Hall. Completion of a new campus master plan. There had been plans, but the plan, we were doing it differently. It was very important that we redo a new one. And so this was completed in September of 2010, in case you were wondering when that was. And almost right away, we said, we know what we need to do. We're going to build the Science Center, which had originally been planned to be done, but we had to do the had to do the library because of the emergency. Okay. Capital campaign is launched. What are we going to do with this? We're going to build the Bishop Gerber Science Center. We're going to renovate a 20-year-old building, Eck Hall, which is getting very close to 25 now. And we're going to grow the endowment, and we're also going to grow giving to what we call today the Newman Fund, which is our annual fund. So this is what we want to attempt to do. This was the largest capital campaign to date and has to be the most successful. There's just no question in relation to that. Why? Well, it's because we had an excellent advancement staff, Dr. Carochi, constantly with them, making all of these asks, and we can't leave out the work of Bishop Eugene Gerber. If he had not lent his name as well as his time and went on a number of these calls, this would not have happened. And I think that it would do dishonor if we didn't mention that. So this tells you, but I got some other things to add to it. This year, we have blessed and dedicated the Bishop Gerber Science Center. We are soon to bless the Heimerman Plaza, the Honor Wall, and the Gerber sculpture. And that's going to take place yet this month. So these are more. So I think this is all of this. And I'm going to make a statement later of what I see in relation to this whole area. Now we move to another one, the expenses and financial aid. First off, tuition costs. I just want to make a couple of general statements. In relation to undergraduate courses, we continue to have a flat rate for 12 to 19 hours. Just there. And it's interesting. There was 1 year from 98, 99, 99, 2000. It was a frozen one. In other words, it stayed exactly the same. I will tell you, it's the only year. The flat rate started in 98 at 4,500. Who knows what it is today? Okay, Georgia.
For the year or the semester?
This is per semester.
A little over 14?
It's, yeah, 14. Anyway, if you look at that, you'd say, whoa, that's a huge increase. But I'm going to tell you this. We're constantly dealing with all other factors that go with this, and it has never increased more than about 5% a year. And there have been years that it has not increased that often. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing in relation to that. We know we are not a school charging the most tuition in Kansas. In fact, where are we? Are we middle? We're about right in the middle. Sometimes we're right below the middle. But we have never been up toward the top, okay, in all of these years. Room and board. This is the one that has basically remained. First, the statement I want to make is they remain together. We charge room and board in one lump sum, okay? And that stayed that way from 98 until 2008. So 10 years ago, there was a change. And I don't know if many of you would know why. Does anybody know why it changed? We built a hall in which you didn't have to be on a meal plan. Okay, so when Fugate was opened, you had to come up with a new thing. I thought that was interesting, that you don't think about it. Why is it that it changed? Well, that's the reason. It's very practical in regard to that. And by the way, they remain separated today. Graduate tuition rates were based on credit hours, not a flat rate, that a student was enrolled per semester. As more graduate programs were added, each had a unique cost per credit hour. Some were close and it's the same, but most of them have a separate one. The expansion of the residence halls, of course, as I told you, you're going to have prices for private and double occupancy per residence hall. They differed. After a while, they got closer together. It's kind of interesting. As the newness kind of wears off, it changes. I told you about the meal plans, that they've changed often over the years. But one thing I can say about the last 20 years and the meal plans or food service, does anybody know what it would be? That hasn't changed. Angel. We still are being served by Great Western Dining. That maybe the people have changed, but the point is, they have been here the whole time. They were here before that time, too. Fees. Can't go into a lot of this, but just some general ideas. The type and the amount of fees per semester have increased through the years for both undergraduate and graduate students. I'll give you some examples. A tech fee, parking fee, student activity fee. I'm not going to name them all. I just wanted to give you an idea. What am I referring to when I say that? How academic and other scholarships, how we've awarded them has changed over the years. When I say other scholarships, I'm referring to athletic, performing and visual arts, etc. Just gave you that as an example so you'd understand what I'm referring to. So how they've been awarded has varied. There are also, and has always been, many need-based scholarships awarded. I think that's something to remember. We have never varied from making sure that that is included in the area. I put it down as a separate one, but forgot to remind myself that I did that. The number of annual and endowed scholarships has significantly increased. I have something that Pam Pauley brought me a little while ago, because we're creating this book that's going to have a booklet that's going to have all of these in it that we have. It is amazing because it will fill a book, not just a notebook, but something that we can actually put out, like a lot of colleges and that do. If you're wondering, there are individuals who do give us an annual scholarship. Every year they help fund that scholarship. There are those who have also endowed a scholarship, and the percentage of what comes from that endowed scholarship helps us out. But Newman University still discounts costs of a student's education. And we all know that. Too much. So even though we try to do that to get it better, and we've improved it. That book is big. It's going to be wonderful when it's all finished. And it might never get finished. After I looked at it today, I said, oh my God. After she left, because she wanted me to take a look at some of the things in it. So anyway, but that's a reality. Well, I thought maybe we ought to do something about academic programs. I mean, isn't that why we're around here? Is we want to educate students? All of these areas, though, are important to every bit of that. In looking at the catalogs that covered the last 20 years, the graduate and undergraduate requirements are listed separately. And I can almost tell you the pages that they start on. The undergraduate starts on that page, and then you go back and you'll see where the graduate programs. So you have a different section in each of those. So that's been there. In 1998, when we became Newman University, I want you to know that this was what we were calling some of these programs. We had what we called, and it would have been in the business area. It was called Organizational Leadership. The MBA was not added until 2001. Education, as I introduced last time, was known as Building Leadership, but names and areas of concentrations have been added over the years. Sometimes we have it listed separately, even a special degree in that, and it lists it, or we say they concentrated in this. So in other words, that's changed over the years. There's no question. And I can't take time to list them all, but I'd like to say that. Nursing, it had a concentration to begin with in administration and in education. And I think most of you know we discontinued our graduate program in nursing. Then the graduate program in social work. And that one came again, right as we were about to get to, well, in 98. All of these were, in 98, this is what you would have found in the catalog. The next year, in 99, nurse anesthesia was added and was available. I already did it. Sorry. Undergraduate programs were added and discontinued related to marketability. Don't you love that term? The last years of the 1990s added programs, some of which are still available. So I spotted some of them. Liberal studies, management information systems were brand new at the end of the 90s, okay? And they are still around today. Special programs were added. And these are not necessarily, well, they're all academic, but they're not necessarily a major, okay? I'll give you an example. What we call the ASC, or the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, community leaders, scholars. Okay, I just have CLS, so I always have to stop and remember. That was started in '98. Even though you do not find the name, I have been assured that the course and program, Traditions and Transitions, started in '99. It had a different name. I don't even remember what it was. And it was listed in a place that I was very surprised where it was listed. So in other words, I just wanted to point that out. The International Studies program officially is in a catalog in 2000. It didn't mean that we didn't have some students who did start going, but this is programs where you could go to study in Ireland, or the one we have today, Birmingham, different ones that you would actually have the possibility for. The honors program, way back, we could have honors in a major, but to say we had an honors program did not start till 2008. And that's a very popular program and a draw to our university today. The Newman Studies program, who can give me an exact date on it? 2007? 11. You're close. Depends. Yeah, we started talking about it, but the Newman Studies program, which we have today, actually started in 2011. Okay. And by the way, that is the current name for our core curriculum. There were some programs, it says, altered by requirements of the industry. What that means is something happened in that field that said, you got to make a change. And one of those would have been, I'll give you the example, occupational therapy. We had tremendous enrollment in occupational therapy, but their requirements changed. You had to have a graduate degree. And so for a baccalaureate degree, we could have the occupational therapy assistant program. And of course, some new majors brought new students, there's no question. We watched what was happening, brought us new students, and retention efforts. And I'm going to give you an example first of some ones that we brought in, new students: sports communication, theater, forensic science. There were also those, some majors, that we added to retain students who completed associate programs in some of our allied health fields. So what did we do? We added a healthcare science. A major in that. Also interdisciplinary studies, a major. These were reasons that people could then stay in for 4 years and complete a degree. But they also did the allied health program that they had been working on. Off-campus sites. Graduate and undergraduate programs at other sites, Southwestern, Kansas, many of them. Oklahoma City, Tulsa, we had some of these. Southeastern Kansas, of course, Colorado Springs. So these are all ways in which we began to put programming. And as I said, a number of them are graduate, but there are some undergraduate also, but only in certain fields. Strategic planning. When did we hear that term last? At least there was something on my computer that asked me to do something, which, by the way, and I hate to say this, but when I finished it, it was a lie. It took you a lot longer to do this. I think I spent 2 hours. And I didn't have that many interruptions, but I didn't know I was going to have to take that much time. But I'm sure I could have also just done it fast. But I chose to kind of try to work at it. And That's my fault for having been around here and having opinions. Okay, first off, strategic plans for Newman University involve the entire community, as they are invited to participate. The Chief Academic Officer has primarily spearheaded this effort here at Newman. Most plans that we have been for 5 years. The new plan that we're going to be starting will be from 2019 to 2022, and that will only be 3 years. The Chief Academic Officer. The current title for the Chief Academic Officer, I could do the first part, but I didn't know about this other one. The person is called the Provost, the Vice President for Academic Affairs, and the Dean of Faculty. Not called Academic Dean. Why not? Because there's a bunch of academic deans. Okay? So that's the reason. So this is the official title. In addition to working with the teaching faculty, the provost is responsible for the library, for IT, for the registrar's office, academic and student support services, retention, and advanced standing. Several of these responsibilities are delegated to members of the academic staff. In other words, the provost doesn't necessarily do every one of those, but delegates them. And I have seen lots of people that have been the recipient of that delegation, myself being one. Okay? I'm not bitter, not bitter. But it is interesting. During the past 20 years, the number of faculty and staff in this area of the university has varied. Sometimes budget realities were related. I'll give you an example. A program closes. The faculty member, if it's possible, is retained if there's another field. If it's not, sometimes it was stopped. And part of that was because there were budget problems. I can remember this happening a lot in the early part of the 2000s. A lot. And I think those of you who were here probably know that. And you might say, well, it looks like we're doing some of that today. Yeah, yes and no. I can't totally say that that's true, but I also can't just totally say I don't see some examples, but we don't always know the whole story. And a historian is somebody who tries to get to the whole story. And when I don't know the whole story, I should keep my mouth shut. And that's something that's a wise choice to do. Oh, by the way, the tremendous increase in faculty and staff that we saw at the tail end of Kansas Newman College, we are not at that level. Okay, do you remember it was well over 100? Now, it is if we include adjuncts, etc. But the number of full-time faculty and half-time faculty is not at that particular level. And a lot of that was changed almost immediately after 2000 in relation to it. I'm not saying, was it necessary to do that? I'm just simply telling you that's a reality. The numbers are there. Now, student life. 20 years ago, the chief academic officer, okay, let's speed it up. Person was called in 98, the chief academic, or the chief officer for student life was called the vice president for student affairs. In 2001, the title was changed for 1 year to the vice president for enrollment and student affairs. And then the following year, in 2002, the provost model was introduced and remains today. Sometimes we had a dean of students during that time period, and sometimes we did not. So it would depend upon how much of the model of the provost model and where did that go with it. So just thought you'd like to know that there's been some changes in that area. The directors of various areas reported to this officer, no matter what. Most of these directors had employees reporting to them or worked in teams. Over the past 20 years, those areas have gone through name and responsibility changes. Several directors are the only ones in their department, while others have over 10 employees reporting to them. This is one of the most fluid areas of a small Catholic private liberal arts university. That's the statement. That I wondered if I should say it for enrollment management and admissions. I think theirs is fluid, but I believe this whole area of student life is the most fluid. Because we have so many changes constantly. And so we switch it around in relation to that. Intercollegiate athletics not only changed athletic associations from NAIA to NCAA, but also conferences. The Heartland Conference being a provisional member to full membership, and MIAA in 2019. Sports available for men and women, student athletes have gone. Starting in '98, we had 9 total. Today we have 18. Now you have to take my counting, but that's what I counted, and it seemed to me that was the correct number. I don't know how many ways I counted it, but it seemed to be 18. Some coaches are full-time, while about half are part-time. Athletics provides leadership for established goals of annual fundraising. In case you didn't know this, they have responsibilities for fundraising and for educational programs and training for all of their athletes. And there's some times that we say, well, we don't know. But the point is, this is a responsibility, and I think we have to at least say we have seen various attempts to do this, and we receive emails saying that they're doing it, and also witness it ourselves. Resident Life is under this, has operated for years with student resident advisors. They've been around for years, but the number selected annually has grown as the number of residence halls on campus have multiplied. Currently, all resident halls are co-ed, but there are floors or wings that are reserved for male or female students, as well as quieter areas available. And I understand that that really is true. And of course, there's not too many people living in Merlini, so it's pretty quiet all the time, I would think. Since its opening in 2007, Fugate Hall provided apartment living and an opportunity for 21-year-old plus students to not be on a required meal plan. There's that answer I told you about before. Academic and student support services received its first financial spark plug back in the middle part of the first, well, it was in the mid-1990s. It was part of, we got a Title III. And that Title III talked about computers on campus, but it also had a huge section in relation to providing these services. So that's where the original money came from. Well, once those initial monies were used, then you had the responsibility to fund these important areas from its annual budget. This has affected not only the funds available to spend annually, but also the number of employees we can afford to have in a given area, making for some very difficult choices. Encompasses what's in this area: the hangar, academic resource center, career services, testing areas, ADA accommodations, and special counseling and special populations advising. It's a huge area. Dugan Library and Campus Center. You might say, well, why wouldn't you have just left Dugan with the academic? Well, because of the fact that all this stuff was built at the same time. So I just want to refer to a couple of things. When this was opened in 2007, this building has existed for half of the 20-year period now. It's one of the busiest buildings on campus. This was not true for the first few years of existence. Why not? The students had gotten used to not having a freestanding library. They didn't know where to find it. If you wanted to come and find the quietest place on this campus, you'd come to any part of this building. And even an area where it should be noisy wasn't noisy because there wasn't anybody over here. I will never forget it. I thought, my God, what are we going to do? Well, we've hired some people that have made a difference. And we've done a lot of faculty have gotten people over here. There's been a big change in this particular area. The librarians have programmed this increase in services and provided an atmosphere to attract the Newman community inside the building. In addition to the library, marketplace, and scooters, the Student Center attracts many students with their services and programming, that area that I call the most fluid. Campus ministry has been staffed by the missionaries of the most precious blood, a redemptorist, and diocesan clergy since the beginning of the 1970s. Sometimes, in addition to serving as chaplain, these priests often taught theology courses. Most of the time, student ministers assisted in staffing the offices. Over the past 15 years, we've had an administrative assistant, full or half-time, to assist with the many responsibilities from the office. The chaplain was located originally in the building that was called Beata Hall, which no longer exists, not the residence place. For over 10 years it was there. The office has been somewhere in Sacred Heart Hall since the mid-1980s to present day. It's been several places. Today it is near St. John's Chapel and is a very attractive and creative department. I wanted to add another word, and that was loud. Just come when we have got classes and that going on, and the students that are in there, and everybody that stops in. It is the loudest office, and I think it's not just me who would say that, even though I'm diagonally across from them. There's very seldom that is a quiet area at all. There's a lot of life. That's good. Student clubs and organizations, you're going to love this one. The variety and type of student clubs and organizations has significantly changed and grown based upon student interest and demand. Guidelines and procedures for starting a club are available and used by students and club sponsors to meet this need. The end on that. Okay, conclusion. What did I find that were the biggies over these 20 years? I think the first one is enrollment and retention initiatives. This has affected us terrifically. Whether we use consultants or not, we've given so much time and efforts to this because we want to have our classes filled. We want to educate students. So all of those things, which I talked about, I think that this is one of those things that's the most influential. The next one, success of 3 major capital campaigns has changed the footprint of Newman's campus. Bring alumni back, that's the first thing they say. First thing they say, my gosh, this looks like a real college campus. And they talk about, well, what it was here when they were here. I'm going to say, we saw buildings in the 60s and stopped in 70. Didn't do a thing again until in the 90s. But look what we've done since 98. That's tremendous. It has changed our footprint. And the last one, I really think that this is major. In 2017, the Higher Learning Commission Self-Study Campus Visit and Decision marked the first time in the history of Newman that there were no concerns cited. That's huge. Now, let me tell you what I thought about. These 3 is what I would say about what I have presented this year.
Sacred Heart Junior College, not so much. But once we start talking in 52 of Sacred Heart College, every one of these play a role. Every one of them. How do we increase the enrollment? How do we retain these students? We've got to have some campaigns. And so we couldn't pull them off until we got into the 60s, but we needed them. And this last one, that was what was driving it all along. We needed to do these things because we needed to be accredited. And then what was that going to do? Go back to that first one again. That was going to help us to do all of that. So this is why I was going to do about 7. And all of a sudden I said, no, it's these 3. Now remember, this is the truth according to Charlotte. And somebody else would do it differently. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate your attention, and exactly at 1 o'clock. Sorry, I really was going to have questions this time. But I get too carried away, tell you little stories in between. Anyway, if you want to ask, yes.
I think one thing that those of us who've been here just 11 years or
Right.
less, we don't have any memory of McCormick Street running through here.
Yeah,
So Dr. Dunleavy getting the city to reroute McCormick Street was huge.
yeah, it is. And I think what I do is I lump that in with part of the campaigns because
Right.
it was part of, with that building, that's what we had to do. I will never forget when we brought back those academy people, when we did this dedication of the Beata Plaza out there. They were shocked. Well, first off, it hadn't been rerouted, and they were given tickets. And they didn't know why they were being given tickets on their cars. I had to get over to the police department and get this all checked, because they didn't know any better. I don't want to even tell you how many tickets I wound up with that day. I was the alumni director, so I didn't have to pay them. The police department worked with me. But thank God we solved that. We still have parking issues from time to time. Okay, well listen, thanks again. You've been great people, and most of you have been here for all of them, and I greatly appreciate your coming and your attention. Thank you.